Hey everybody, and welcome today 272. Whoa, Rev, I like this picture. So anyway, today's training, it was 100 degrees. I did a lot of rep work. Everything went well. I want to spend this voiceover speaking about my experiences. I try not to ramble on, but just with low carb diets and athletic performance. This is in response to a talk that I listened to by Adam. Shout out to him, 5 a.m. Squat Club. Check out his channel. He has his own farm, and he does basically like a keto diet, lots of eggs and meat and everything like that. And it had very interesting points to say about the reasons why he does that, and he does well on that type of diet. So let me say my first experience with a diet, as in cutting weight. It started, I was like 19. I had, I told the story before, I was working away from home. My grandpa got sick. I came back home. My job was I was restoring cars, and then I was flipping them, working on them with him. And then in the evening, a lot of my older friends had come back from college and stuff like that. So everyone would be playing basketball at the park at night all day long. Or Sunday through Thursday, I should say. I have been doing normal athletic training, P90X, things like that. And I wanted to see, I had never been over 180 pounds before, maybe 175 pounds. And, I was on bodybuilding.com, reading all the forums and stuff like that. I was taking multivitamins, creatine, whey protein. But I came to the conclusion that I needed to eat more. And I didn't believe this ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph, types. I was just like, let me try it out for myself. So I had got weight gainer. I remember one day my dad had came by the house. He saw me opening up a package and he was like, what is this? What are you putting in your body? Me, of course, 19 years old, and I didn't have a good relationship with my dad at the time. And, I'm reading these bodybuilding.com forums and stuff and like, I'm taking weight gainer to gain weight. And he's looking at it and he's just like, this is full of junk. It's full of sugar. Like, why don't you just, if you want to gain weight, why don't you just eat potato chips and ice cream? And my dad did get us into lifting weights with all the sports as well. But I'll look at him like, he never lift weights. Like, oh, what do you know? But as many things in life, turns out that he was absolutely correct from a common sense perspective. And later on, I would end up making my own shakes and adding sugar to it and different things if I wanted to gain weight. But it certainly did work. I was having, milk with my whey proteins and milk with the weight gainer. And I went from 172 to 226 pounds, and I was hurting. But I gained the weight, and now it was first time in my life to try to go on a diet. I was super sloppy, and I had been lean, my whole life, but I was never ripped. I didn't want a 6-pack, 8-pack. I wanted to have ab veins and all that. So again, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm watching Rocky. I'm looking up Arnold's diet. I'm looking up, Sylvester Stallone's diets. They're talking about, egg whites and one piece of burnt toast and all this stuff. So I'm having chicken by itself in the morning. Stuff, I'm eating spinach by itself, and I've got all these different meals that take forever to prep, and it's just not working out. But I go from 226 down to 200 in about 6 to 8 weeks. I find a website from Scooby 1971. He's one of the original fitness YouTubers. I didn't watch him on YouTube or anything like that. I started doing this bodybuilding split, body part split at that point. And I started doing his carb cycling diet that he talked about for the last 6 to 8 weeks. So for these 6 to 8 weeks, I had stopped playing basketball. I was doing hour to hour and a half on the stationary bike. I ended up working up to 2 sessions of 45 minutes. And every session, if you see how I train, was to be a PR. I'm not just cruising on that bike. I'm hitting a number, and the next session I'm beating that number. And then in between those 2 sessions, I'm doing a body part, chest or back or whatever. Mainly I had dumbbells and stuff like that. The carb cycling's going well. I think, honestly, this is probably the leanest I've been in my whole life, even till today. And then the last week I had looked up like a contest prep for a bodybuilder I found on bodybuilding.com, Lane Norton. had wrote. So I'm doing sodium manipulation. I'm cutting the carbs completely out, and then I'm taking the water out. I'm bringing it back in. I'm not having all the proper everything I need. I remember I needed to load up on sodium, and I had nothing in the house, and I ended up just having my bowl of rice, and I made up the sodium with hot sauce. And I can't handle spice very well, but I basically dumped a whole bottle of hot sauce on it and put it down just to hit whatever I needed to hit. I weighed out all the food on a scale to a T, and I could not believe day after day after day that last week just how lean I was getting. It was crazy. I got fake tan on and everything like that. So all that work, I took pictures. After that, I had a cheat meal, ate whatever I wanted the rest of the night. Next day, I'm ready to go back to the park and go play ball with my friends. I gained 20 pounds in one day, and when I went to jump, I could not jump over a piece of paper. There was so much water and carbohydrate fluctuation. It was unreal. But yeah, that worked, and then I ended up tearing my ACL. And then when I rehabbed from that, like I said, that's when I started. All my training was into sprinting from then until now, and sprint workouts. And then that's really when I started doing more big barbell type of lifts and things like that. So I knew, these sprinters elite sprinters at around my height, they weigh 180 pounds. I got to weigh 180 pounds. I was always obsessed with keeping my weight down. So what diet do I know to do? I'm doing this carb cycling diet. I might start at 190, a month in, 2 months into training, I get down to 185. I slowly get down to 180, and then I'll have a tweak somewhere. So I'll take a little bit of time off. I didn't want to lift while I couldn't sprint because I figured I'm going to put on too much muscle and I need to stay as light as I can. And then this would happen training cycle after training cycle, and I just keep getting frustrated. I'm 200 pounds. I can't get down to 180. So I'm just cutting calories more and more and more. And this is also a point where I'm like, man, at a certain point, especially when you're newer into training, although I had already been training 15 years at the time, just the amount of, banded and chain and heavy work I'm doing, even in calorie deficit after calorie deficit, I'm just putting on, you could cut off my leg and I'm still not going to get down to 180 pounds flat again. And this also goes back to whenever I laugh when people talk about overtraining. Like while I'm on these carb cycling diet on very low calories as well, I remember there's a time I'd always warm up and jog to the end of my street, which takes like 50 seconds, right? I used to always do a dynamic warm up for 45 minutes. So I'd always start with a couple jogs to the end of the street. And I was so lean when I went to go jog to the end of the street, I was like halfway down and I was just huffing and puffing and there was zero energy. I basically had to crawl back to the house. I could not believe how exhausted I was. And I'm sprinting hours a day, 4 days a week, doing throws, doing jumps, doing lifts, doing all these things. And just, yes, the low calories, but on the low carbs, just cannot operate on it. So I'm sure it's partly the low in the calorie deficit or the low amount of calories, but I wanted to see for myself. So I thought it was the carbs. So I tried to experiment with keto. Man, 3 days, those were the worst days of my life. I couldn't imagine how bad these sprint performances were, these jumping performances were. And I know I read, you got to take a little bit of time to, get past it or adapt it. It was 100% clear that there was no chance that was going to work. And like I've said before, to the opposite extreme, I did 7 months of basically a rice-only diet, no whey protein, very trace amount of protein. I didn't have any cheat meal. I literally probably had like a couple grams of protein a day from like fruit or something like that. And it's just night and day operating with carbohydrates and without carbohydrates. And you don't have to do those extreme of approaches to see the difference. But yeah, lack of carbohydrates, it was okay in a bodybuilding standpoint. I could ride the stationary bike. I could do the bodybuilding workouts on low calories, on carb cycling. That last week of that diet, as the carbs got taken out, I think it was only like 1 or 2 days with no carbs. It wasn't as bad, but yeah, for athletic performance, it's absolutely not going to work. So that's some of my experiences with that. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll talk to you tomorrow.